All right, hello everyone. My name is Isaiah Cartwright. I'm the lead game designer, and I'm here and we're going to talk about Necro. So the Necro has a number of different builds that can really go well in PvE. I think we're going to start talking about Wells as the first build. This is a fairly common build, and there's a couple different ways that you can run it. It really revolves around utilizing these 4 different wells, and you can even well of power or and is the other well that you can use. And it's really kind of depends on the different things that you're trying to do. Well of Darkness has a couple fun tricks that you can do. Basically the kind of pulsing blind, if you grab the 3 skill over here on curses, you can actually give yourself a chill, and so this thing will then also chill. There's other blind skills that you have to do different things. The well builds is run in a couple different ways, but it really evolves around having all 3 wells, which give you a lot of AoE damage and your heal well. And the kind of 2 main versions that I see on this is the Clerics gear, which kind of is more your tanky version. This really is all about pumping up your healing power and your toughness, and so you're really durable and getting a lot of your damage just purely out of your wells and your marks and different things like that. And then what that also gives you is if you run a dagger, the high healing will get your life siphon to get you a lot more health back, and so you can really stay alive in PvE. And it's a good build for a group build because you get a lot of AOE healing with the Well of Blood and things like that. With that build, I do like the Flesh Golem version a lot, where you run Flesh Golem. You can also kind of run a couple different ways. You can run the wells that siphon, but you can also run the minions. Where is that sucker? Minions siphon health, and this with the charge on the minions, because it triggers every time the minion hits, and the charge hits really rapidly. You can get a lot of health back that way. But it's a very simple and fun build to kind of play around with, and it allows you to do a lot of AoE damage and have a lot of durability. The kind of other stat side of this is you run kind of the Berserker gear, which is I think what I'm wearing right now. And this gives you a lot higher damage. You kind of want to get your crit damage and your power up really high. You want to run, either your steak dinners or and your sharpening stones. You can also do star food if you really want, but you can kind of get your crit up and your power up, and this really allows you to just get a lot of damage. Even Dagger Skill 1 does a fairly good amount of damage, especially with these builds, and so it's something to not forget. And then a lot of the times with this build, since you're in PvE and you want to focus a lot more on AoE, staff is really good for you. There's a couple things, depending on how your spec that you're running, you can also increase the area of effect of your staff. But it's pretty decent to begin with. And so that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the well build. I think it's actually a really good build for leveling up. I know I see a lot of comments about Necros leveling up, having a little bit harder time. You can kind of go into the well build. Another bit with that is Signet of Spite. It gives you a lot of power while you're leveling up, and it's fairly cheap and easy to get into, and so you can get a lot of quick power that way, or even Well of Blood, or Blood is Power, sorry. Those 2 can kind of get you some extra damage when you're leveling up if you're getting into a place that you need to do some more damage or going through this. Some other really common builds are the Terror build. This one's really focuses on condition damage, and what Terror does is Terror will allow you to get damage with your fear, and so as your higher condition damage, fear becomes another condition that can do damage. When you really want to run the Terror build, you really want to go kind of all into conditions. You want to get a lot of different conditions that are going up. You can also run the Doomfire if you want a little extra, but you can get burning on top of it. You want to run the extended conditions on different ways. You can get your bleeds up to really high. You can run the pizza. Sometimes you don't need to run the pizza depending on your spec here, or if you're using like a giver's weapon or runes setup that gives you more conditions, and that can really help. And when you're doing the power versions, like with the well, sometimes I actually find just ruby jewels to be really good. You get just a lot of pure raw damage out of those things, and a lot of the way that build works, you don't get a lot of benefit out of your your 6 rune stat. You know, divinities is always good for that stuff too. And the Terror build can be set up in a couple different ways. Usually you run Scepter and Staff are the main kind of pieces of the Terror build, because that's where you're getting the most of your conditions. And also, it's really important to get the fear from your Reaper's Mark. And so that is kind of, the Terror build's pretty simple in that it's really dumping a lot of conditions and things. There's some fun things you can do sometimes with Terror build is you can get Epidemic here and then spreading a lot of conditions. It kind of doubles up on the AoE versionary conditions. If you drop an AoE and do like 10 conditions on you know, a bunch of targets, and then you Epidemic one of the targets in the center of it, it'll cast all those conditions again on everything. And so you can really get a lot of conditions going at once. And so Epidemic's pretty fun in PvE and setting those kind of pieces up. But that's kind of the Terror build in a nutshell, and doing those conditions. Often when you're running the Terror build, you want to run Plague or other to kind of get you going. But for PvE, Flesh Golem is always really fun. The way he's kind of just helps you with getting away or tanking or doing different pieces like that. Another kind of fun, interesting build that you can do is the Life Blast build. In PvE, you get a lot more life force than you get everywhere else, and so that can really allow you to stay in Death Shroud a little bit longer. And so there's a couple builds that you can do with that, but one that I really like is you get your just raw damage really, really high, and you can do like Life Blast gets you Might. You can get down here the Life Blast pierces, which is pretty much the crucial component to that build, and you get your Life Blast up as high as you can. You can, you know, go into traits that increase your damage when you're below. You can go into the traits that gives you higher crit damage while you're in Death Shroud, and these things can really allow your Death Shroud to start hitting for really high numbers. You know, you can get to like 3 or 4, even 5K sometimes on those hits, and really just spam that sucker away. And then it's really good with that build when to run things like Dagger or other bits that can get you back life force really quickly. You know, you can run like your Ghost Armor and your Spectral Walls Spectral Armor and Spectral Walls to get you back your life force really, really quickly. And so those become really important to putting together. Spectral Walls also really good for the Fear build. You know, you really want to for the Terror, you really want to get every application of Fear that you possibly can, because that's just another damage dot, and it also reduces damage coming into you. And so those work really well. The Life Blast build's kind of fun because it's so focused on your Death Shroud skills. You can also run like that Signet of Spite and jack your power up as high as you can, and play around in different areas like that. I mean, I think some other builds, you can go a little bit more into the tanky with grabbing like the Soldier's rune set. You know, you can run like the Rune of the Fighter, and you can either do that in the Wells build or some of the other bits. But the tankiness works really well with the Necro, being able to kind of stay alive and let just the attrition of your conditions or your damage kind of slowly start to build up on the different things. Another build that is really effective in doing that kind of tanky play is the minion build. And you know, you run basically all the different minions that you have available to you. Usually don't run the worm in this, but you get a lot of these guys out, and then you run that blood skill that lets them siphon. I always forget which one it is here. Here, oh, that one. And then every time the creatures are attacking, you're getting some health back, and so you can kind of keep yourself alive with, you know, Soldier or even Knights is good in doing this build, while getting a bunch of health back from all your different minions. And the minions also can be really good at just absorbing hits or blows from the enemies. Creatures will attack them and tie themselves up, and so you can kind of slog things down a little bit and be able to keep people alive and be a decent tank in that regard. Kind of going back to the Well build, I think the Well build has a bunch of different tricks and pieces to it. You know, I like one of the versions of Well build, like I was talking with the Well of Darkness. You can run kind of a 3 chill duration setup, and what that'll do is, and then you can run, like your focus, get you a chill, and you can also get a couple traits that'll proc chill in different ways, and you can really keep chill up a lot on your targets, and so it allows you to just hold things down. It's really good in like World v World or those types of areas when you're doing stuff too, because it's hard for people to run away when they're constantly getting the chill to hold them down. The well build also works pretty decently in World v World. It's some of the weaknesses, people running away from you. You can run the ground targeted wells. I think it works out a little better in PvE than it does in World v World, but it all depends on what you're trying to do. If you need to throw wells down from a defensive position, those things also work really well. But it's kind of depending on how you want to set up your well build, whether you're going for a little bit more of a tanky version or a little bit more light version. When it comes to runes, like I said, there's kind of quite a few options depending on which one you're going. I always like, when I'm going the heavy condition builds, either stacking a bunch of duration, like getting my condition duration or bleeds up as high as I can. That way they stick for a long time in PvE and becomes a lot of damage, and I can spend my time kiting and dodging and things like that. The other route you can go is just really high condi damage in general. When you're running the Rabid rune set, you get a lot of extra toughness, which helps a lot in PvE, and then the Rune of Undead kind of turns that all into some more condition damage, especially that combined with getting the extra condition damage from the your tuning crystals, and getting the new, we put out a new sigil recently that gives you percentage condition damage. There's a little bit of a text error right there where it just says 6 condition damage. It's actually 6% condition damage. And so that combined with all these, you can actually get your condition damage really, really high when you're running like the Terror build. It combos really well together to giving you lots of damage and focusing your time on dodging or moving around or those different things. And then with the different fears that are triggering. You can run an armor set when you're running the Terror that gives a fear proc every once in a while. I find it a little bit more useful in the PvP environments where there will be a lot of things, but it's just a little too random, and I think it's not as dependable, and it ends up not being a ton of damage, but it is a viable way to go set things up. With that thing, you can also, like just stacking the 3 different bleed durations, probably the majority of your damage comes from the different skills that apply bleed. You kind of are throwing a whole lot of conditions on at once, so you want to do, I like just raw condition duration, either from pizzas or Giver's Arm weapons, or and setting that kind of stuff up. And so, but do realize that a lot of your damage is coming from the bleeds, and so the more you kind of focus on that. It can be a little bit weaker when you're in a PvP environment, because when you focus all your durations on the bleeds, it's easy for them to get one removal and get a lot of your bleeds out of there. And so, diversifying that. The Necro can also work with a Rampagers build where you go, condition damage and power. They do have a lot of mixture of the two. And when you're also going in the raw damage version, you can run Axe in a bunch of different ways. One of the weaknesses to running the dagger is it's very single target focused, and so it's hard to get a lot more AoE. It's why I think the wells combo well with it, because you get your kind of keep yourself alive while you're staying in the wells, and you can kind of pull the creatures into the wells, and so allowing yourself to stay alive, it's harder to kind of dodge and kite when you're doing the well build. And so I like dagger for that, to kind of keep myself alive. But if I want to get some, a little bit more range damage, or really, you can get a lot of good damage just out of raw axe. And so, that also is kind of a good weapon I like to use when I'm doing the life blast build. It really kind of combos well with those two pieces. And when it comes to food, getting some of the basics, there's, you have get some crit damage food. 10% crit damage is really high, and there's a couple foods that can get it. So when you're running the damage-based builds, those can be really effective. I also, just some tankiness when I'm for different things. I like to keep a lot of different foods in my bag and then switch the foods out depending on what kind of piece of content I'm playing or what encounter I'm at. And so, I like truffle raviolis just because getting some crit and some toughness is really good. And then I usually use between sharpening stones, and tuning crystals, depending on the types of build that I'm going. But you can also use oil to get yourself more crit. I find, depending on the build, a lot of times I get a lot of crit from the Death Shroud bit out of the greater chance. You can actually run a fairly low crit build when you're running the Life Blast if you want, or you can get to 100% crit. Just depends on how you kind of want to min-max. I think if you're going way more heavier crit damage, whether it's Ruby Jewels or running like a Scholar's set, those things you really do want to make sure you get some more points into crit in different ways. When you're running Terror build, you can. I also do like running Sigil of Earth. I don't have it in my inventory here, but just getting that extra bleeds on crits. You're already getting pretty decent crits just going into the curse line, and getting your extra duration. So those things can really help. While Scepter is very primary condition damage, it does actually hit, and so because it hits, it crits, and you can also get a lot going out of that. Crits also function really well in the axe builds because it hits a lot of different times, and so you can get a lot of your procs based on those different pieces. I think one of the other bits when running, the minion build, all the different minions that you can get, they do, as you're moving around and going, they're always kind of moving, but they really do help. They really do help allow you to kind of tank a lot better. They absorb projectiles and different things like that, and so that can be really, really helpful. It has kind of some similar play to when you're running the Spirit Ranger, that kind of just like shield around you of guys. And so I think there's a lot of just intrinsic nature to having a bunch of minions around with the minion build that ties up creatures when you're running through things. In World v World, I really like it because it just looks more intimidating from the enemy when they see like a bunch of things coming at them. You can kind of get a few Necros together, and when you're running together, and it makes you look like a lot bigger of an army in World v World, which has a lot of fun. And the tankiness of them can really just like slog down and give you more time to bring your minions back when they die. The AoE builds really do churn through your minions, so I like them a lot more in PvE where things are a little bit more single target and they're going there, but there's definitely a lot of different variants there. The Cleric's build's really fun with the wells. I think one of the interesting things about it is it looks like on paper when you start playing it and putting it together that it's got a lot less damage than it actually does. And so, just getting myself here. And so those things, but it really stacks up. You get a lot of wells under your feet, and I'm just not clicking those right. A lot of things under, and really stacks up the damage over and over and over again. And it can really help well with like procs and different things. You can even run the Siphon on crit proc a little bit if you want, and it just adds to the overall damage. You can run Wells Siphon every time they pulse. That can add to the overall damage. Really, when you are running that build and you're running kind of with Dagger main hand, it's pretty required that you grab the Siphons are more effective, because it will really increase the overall amount of healing that you're able to get back from all those pieces. And so those things kind of all combine together to make a fairly durable character. And like I said, when leveling up, I really do like the well build, just because it covers a lot of basics. I mean, one of the big keys to the well build is getting your, it's like the 4 here, it's getting protection on your wells. And just because you're able to constantly throw out those wells, it really allows you to keep up protection all the time. And then that combined with the healing, it really becomes kind of a multiplicative effect. You get some high toughness, and that means every point of healing is a little bit better. And then you get protection up, which then reduces damage on top of that, and that means every healing point's a little bit better. And then you're able to heal a lot with Life Siphon. You're able to stand inside your well of blood and heal, and it makes this really hard character to defeat. And then the different wells can get you different points. Like when you're running Well of Power, it's kind of constantly converting conditions, and it really allows you to defeat different builds. Like if you're in World v World and you're fighting another type of tanky character, it can be really, really effective at helping counter those pieces. When it comes to elites, Plague Form, one of its big advantages it has, it actually multiplies your stats up a lot. and so you can see you get a lot of toughness and vitality while you're inside that. This can be interesting in a few different ways. One, it actually, like, while the number of bleeds and poison comes out of here isn't super insane, it does multiply with some of that stuff I was talking about, where if you run you know, some different buffs that increase your condition damage based on how high your toughness gets, you can actually get your condition damage really high while you're inside of it. And just its overall tankiness can really make it where it's hard for people to focus on you, whether it be a bunch of PvE or in World v World a bunch of people, and it allows you to kind of move around and do different things like that. I think the flesh golems are really just this simple. If you're not sure which one to get, I would definitely start with flesh golem. You know, it's kind of the least one that you have to pay attention to or manage, and it kind of always helps you getting the job done. You know, I have seen some people that run Asura Necromancers to get the radiation field, to just kind of get the extra poison and weakness that's going on there. Definitely don't underestimate the value of spreading weakness around in any game type. The Necro's one of the stronger classes at chucking weakness around, and can really reduce, you know, like I said before, all that kind of multiplicative effect with your healing and your toughness and your protection. Weakness is another layer on top of that. If you get weakness on everything, it'll just continue to overall reduce the amount of damage coming in. And that, you know, that's, and shifting your food around to deal with those encounters can be really good. You know, I know some of the recent changes with Death Shroud, one of the things that people used to be able to do was block a really big hit. And so, you know, if you're used to that, you got to make sure you really adjust. Now damage will spill over, and so it's really important to make sure that when you jump into Death Shroud and you're trying to be tanky, make sure you have a lot of life force. Build it up with you know, the spectral skills that can give you lots of life force in different ways. You know, run skills that give you a lot of life force while you're using them, and really try to keep your life force always up. There's really kind of a balance while playing the Necro from using your life force when it's full, and you know, then getting out of it as soon as you can, kind of jump in, use a couple skills. You know, when you're running the Life Blast build, running things that make it so you don't lose as much life force as every tick, those things can really help keep you in life and keep you longer, and just spamming out that life force. Also, that build, the closer you are, you know, the more your damage kind of does. So you get to that 600 mark and make sure you're maximizing your damage in that far. That build's really fun because there's a little bit of resource management and kind of going back and forth to bouncing around on all those pieces. But a lot of those things kind of come together in doing this. You know, when it comes to jewelry, I don't have any set up on this character right now, but from the different builds, I mean, if you're running the Wells build, I like to usually reserve a lot of my jewelry slots for crit damage, especially for the, you know, inside them running the jewels. You get a lot of crit damage just raw out of the jewels. You can, you know, you get to run the jeweled, the filigrees and pieces for the rubies get up to like 4% damage, which can be really huge in the jewelry. And if you're looking at ascended items, that higher crit damage can really multiply out on all the pieces you have. If you're running kind of the tanky types of builds on those things, I still kind of, if I'm getting my raw damage from my wells, doing the crit damage there is still very viable. And because you're getting so much of your toughness from your stats and your other pieces, but you got to kind of mix and match a little bit. For the terror types of builds, when you're running raw condition damage, I usually just go straight and hard into raw condition damage on my trinkets. You know, you got the rabid gear that you can get up there. Those are always really good for getting, and they're a little bit harder to find on the trinkets. But the settlers is also kind of my stopgap until I get my rabids when I'm setting up my gear, because those are a little cheaper and easier to find, but give you some toughness and some condition damage. And then when you're running rampagers, this is really about getting kind of both power, crit, and it's like kind of an all-in mixed damage. The Necro does pretty good with mixed damage, just like especially with you know, your staff, which is throwing out a lot of AoE conditions, and you know, swapping between dagger and axe and those different pieces. And then usually don't do mixed damage when I'm running Scepter. If I'm going to run Scepter, I kind of like to go a little bit harder into conditions, but those are the, kind of some of the different routes that you can go. Rampages I don't think works as well on the Necro as, like, say, it does on the Ellie, but it's still viable. And so playing around with those different things. I think there's a few other rune sets that can really come into play depending on what you're trying to do. And you can boost some boon duration to try to get some of the effectiveness in different ways. Like, there's a couple ways where you can stack might really well, and that really helps. Kind of depends on who you're playing with and how you want to maximize your overall damage. But the Necro can definitely, with the full Berserker as well build, dish out a large amount of damage. I mean, I think it's very comparable with some of the other characters out there. And so, like, if you really like that min-maxy damage, I think go for the Wells build, go for the Berserker gear. Really focus on getting your crit damage up and make sure your crit is at a reasonable level, and you can really stack up all of this damage on top of each other and get a lot of interaction between the two. If you're really looking for something easier to play, something that you can kind of play back, I think you got the Cleric setup or the Minion build can really help in putting all those things together. But the Necro has a very plethora of usable weapons in the different things. I think my kind of bread and butter go-to is the staff. It works really well in almost all the game types. And then I like dagger a lot, but if you like raw damage, you can go to axe. If offhand focus is really when you want to do that chill types of builds and putting that kind of stuff up. Also, the regen just with the Cleric's build is really good because you get a lot higher regen. So don't underestimate that for sure. And you have dagger offhand and the other bits there. They definitely can kind of mix and match in the different builds to put together the pieces you want. I mean, dagger offhand gets you a really good transfer skill, which you can use, especially if you're doing some of the epidemic type of builds, really paying attention to how those come together. You can also grab Plague Signet and drag all conditions into you when you're kind of putting Signet stuff together, and then that will allow you to send off some conditions, and there's definitely kind of some play that you can do there to really get kind of some on-demand conditions when you're trying to spread them around. Epidemic also becomes pretty fun when you have multiple people with Epidemic. You can really get a lot of conditions on different things. I haven't played around with that too much, but I know it's a very fun build to go. So anyway, that's a real short and quick overview of some of the different builds for the Necro and different ways to play. Make sure you subscribe and follow our channel. And we have a free trial coming up. You should be able to click a button right below this stream. And so please come join us, and thank you for listening.